The next chapter we're going over is chapter 11, and it's about stress. Now, I find this is a bigger chapter, forewarning, and I find that people save this for later in life so that it can help them and remind them on how to deal with stress. So it's actually a positive thing for everyone to try and figure this out. So first we're going to go into stress and illnesses associated with it, and then we're going to go into the more positive aspects and positive things that we can do. So first thing that I have is a question for you. Which do you feel would cause more stress? Marriage, fired at work, retirement, or pregnancy? And let's say pregnancy that was wanted after the age of 18, that kind of thing. So which one do you think causes more stress? Give yourself a second to figure out which one you think it is or what that order may be. Now we have what's called social adjustment scales. Social adjustment scales, there's one overall, there's one for college students, there's one for all different types, but this is an overall adjustment scale. At the top of it is the death of a spouse, all the way down to the bottom of it, which has minor violations of the law. And there's many more things than what just goes on this scale to show you as an overall understanding. There is something that we can't even judge on the scale, and that is the death of a child. Death of a child is well beyond the 100 points out of 100 points. And then if you do look at the area that says, look down and it says marriage, fired at work, retirement, and pregnancy in that order, you'll find that I gave them in the actual order of the highest level of stress down to the lowest. Now there's many reasons as to why marriage is more of a stressor than being fired at work, but each one of them have the reasons why they are a stressor and why they cause you so much stress on that rating scale. Now, I'm going to ask you a few questions. I think there's 7 of them. And what I want you to do is to sort of write it down on a piece of paper so that you can get a gist of where you're at. The first question that I have on our work and schools rating scale is unrelieved task overload. Now, what unrelieved task overload means is that you just don't even know where to begin because there's so many things to do. You're multitasking to an extreme. There's just too much and it's overloading you. Now, what is your stress related to that? So there are those people that have this as stress, but that they don't react to it as a huge stress factor. So on the scale, do you find unrelieved task overload to give you an extremely high rating of task or amount of stress, very high amount of stress, high amount of stress, a moderate or middle amount of stress, low stress, or no stress at all? So where are you on unrelieved task overload? But write down both unrelieved task overload and extremely high, very high, high, moderate, low, or no stress at all. Next question, fear and intimidation by a supervisor, instructor, caregiver, parent, anything along that line. Do you feel that you are being intimidated? Do you feel fear is used to get you to do what you need to do or even what they want you to do? Again, where is your stress level on it? Extremely high all the way down to no stress at all. Write down what it is and then write down what your stress level is on that situation. Discrimination and harassment is next. Do you feel harassed or discriminated against? And what is your stress level relative to that discrimination and harassment? Again, write down discrimination and harassment and what your stress level is associated with it. Monotony and boredom. Monotony is doing the same thing over and over and over again. It can be related to school. It can be related to factory jobs, do that quite often. And then, of course, boredom also causes us stress. Have you ever noticed that sometimes when you're bored, you're more stressed out than when you're actively doing things? So what is your stress level associated with monotony and boredom? You could have it high all the way down to that no stress at all again. Little to no input. Now that means other people make decisions for you. You don't get to have any say in what's going on in your life. So again, is it high or extremely high all the way down to no stress at all? Arbitrary changes means that you never know what the heck is going on. One day everything's fine, the next day it's not. One day you walk into your house and you know that your job was to cook dinner or to do the dishes, but then all of a sudden that changes. Arbitrary changes mean you never know. So for example, at school, it could be that you walk into class and you never know what chapter you're going to do because it'll just depend on what the teacher feels like that day. So you never know what's going on. What's your stress level associated with never knowing what's going on and everything changing without your ability, or you feel there's no ability to change that? No feedback and lack of encouragement is next. So they're not telling you you did a good job. They're not telling you, oh, what a wonderful person you are. Do you get stressed because that doesn't happen? And what is your level of stress again, all the way from extremely high to no stress at all? Now, the branch of psychology that studies this, that studies stress and stressors, and the questions that we just covered, is health psychology. Excuse me. Health psychology is a version of behavioral medicine. So not only do we get the psychology aspect in it, but we also get the medical aspect in it, and those two branches working together. They work on your personality, your attitudes, your responses to stress. So now to understand those questions that we went over, first you need to understand the difference between a stressor and what stress is itself. So a stressor is actually what you think is stress. A stressor is the event, the condition that you find either challenging, overwhelming, threatening, that you find to be the problem. It can be that overload of tasks. It can be discrimination. It can be some kind of tragedy that happened. So those are actually stressors. How we deal with it, how we process those stressors, is actually what causes us stress. We cause stress, not the stressor. The stressor is the entity that's there. How we react to that entity is what gives us our stress level. Now, some of our stressors we can do something about, and some of them we cannot. So let's take a look at that. First, we have to understand the appraisal to get that stress reaction. So do you appraise that situation with a low appraisal or a high appraisal? So now why I chose these pictures, it's actually the example I'm going to give so that you can understand it better. Now, I was sitting at home, actually out on our deck, making my PowerPoints and creating them, and my significant other came home, and he had a high appraisal of the grass not being cut. Now, this was when my kids still lived at home, and my son was supposed to be the grass cutter for us. Since the significant other does landscaping, he doesn't do it at home. So somebody else has got to do it, right? So it was my son that had to do the cutting of the grass. Now, my son was at his job at that time and was not home. The significant other came home for lunch and said, "Oh my God, the grass is not cut," and threw a total conniption fit. He had an extreme high appraisal of it. I could tell his heart was racing. He was breathing faster. Thought maybe he'd have a heart attack right on the spot. It was so significant of a high appraisal. And he wanted that grass cut immediately. I needed to bring that boy home from work. Didn't care if he lost his job or not. Bring that boy home. He needed to cut the grass. Well, in understanding that the significant other is a landscaper and had all the grass cutting equipment with him, and no matter what, had the boy been home, he couldn't have cut the grass anyway because we didn't have the equipment to cut the grass. And the fact that he's at work and I'm not bringing him home to cut the grass. Nonetheless, significant other had huge high appraisal of it, and I had, I don't care. So it didn't help his high appraisal, by the way, but my appraisal of it was, we have dogs at the time, and the higher the grass was, the less I had to pick up poop, which was my job. So I'm good with a higher level of grass. And as long as I could see the dog, and they didn't have to jump through the grass as if it were weeds, and you couldn't find them in it, I was good with the grass and had no hard, heavy appraisal of it whatsoever. So I was like, hey, chill out. By the way, you should never say that to an individual that has a high appraisal of something. It makes things worse. But that mine was a low appraisal, his was a high appraisal. Now, do I have high appraisal of things? Absolutely. But I also know I almost killed myself with high appraisals of things and high cortisol levels. So I have learned to take my own advice and have reappraised my high appraisal situations so that actually at this age now, I don't appraise things highly too often. It's got to be pretty darn significant for it to get a high appraisal out of me any longer. Okay? High appraisals get that sympathetic nervous system going and can increase each and every disease that there is out there, each and every disorder that there is out there. High appraisals make you sick. It's really that quite that simple, and I will explain to you why that happens. That stress reaction from a high appraisal actually gets the cortisol levels going in your body. First, adrenaline gets going. That's very short term, but it also brings about cortisol. Cortisol is to keep you propelling forward, to keep you moving. It's a survival thing, and it lasts much longer. But the more cortisol you have, the more it actually does like rug burn on each and every one of your internal organs. It irritates them, it inflames them, it makes them red and large, and just makes them not function the way they're supposed to. And the number one thing that it actually really hits hard is, of course, that heart. So I know of many people, including a significant other, that has had a heart attack. And they'll say, oh no, it had to do with plaques in my, arteries and whatnot. Well, where do you think those plaques come from? Where do you think those arteries shrinking comes from? It's from that constant high appraisal, which releases cortisol, which makes all of these things occur. So you need to get control of that cortisol. You need to get control of that high appraisal. Bring it down. Think of your road rage. Every time you're on the road and you have a high appraisal, you're releasing cortisol. You are killing yourself. Nobody else, just yourself. So make sure that you get that high appraisal down to at least a mediocre appraisal, if not in a low appraisal. So let's take a look at the way we should look at it to try and bring that high appraisal down. Instead of looking at it as a threat, so here the grass with a significant other, because he's a landscaper, he looked at the grass not being cut as a threat. He felt that every single one of his clients were going to drive by our house, recognize that we don't cut our grass, it's going to look poorly upon him, and they're going to find somebody else to cut his grass. That's a threat. Now, when I looked at it as we're on this little dirt road in the middle of nowhere, surrounded on three sides by woods. No one's going to drive down our road to find out that he's not cutting his grass or whomever's not cutting their grass. And what's the likelihood of having hundreds of people drive down our road that day? It's unlikely. So I looked at it more like a challenge and said, hey, all right, well, when he gets home, he can cut the grass. We'll get that done. I know what we can do. I can develop a plan on what we can do, and we'll get that corrected. But he looked at it as a threat. I looked at it as a challenge. So he looked at it as stress to distraction, where I looked at it as I can be focused, figured out that plan, and get this issue fixed. Now, that's the way you can look at almost every stressful event. There are certain ones that do not. So of the questions that you did at the beginning, poverty cannot be fixed. It must be fixed by others. It can't be fixed by an individual. Even those that have brought themselves out of poverty always have somebody that they say helped them out, got them out of that poverty situation to assist them through it. So it's not something you can fix yourself. So that stressor will cause stress for an individual that they can't actually correct. Another thing is noise, a constant noise that's all the time can be that stressor that can't be corrected. Starvation is one of those things. If you are being harassed or discriminated against, that's one of those things that you can't do. Other people have to fix that situation for you. Otherwise, all the rest of them are caused by you and can be fixed by you. Your reaction to them is what you have to work on and become focused and aroused rather than that stressed to distraction. So there are benefits to stress. The first benefits are like those people that like to procrastinate before they turn in a paper or poster or get study for a test or anything like that. They love the beneficial stress effects. Benefits of stress, that short-term stress, are that it actually improves your immune system to fight off colds, flus, and everything else that's out there. It actually motivates you, it gets you focused, it feels engaged, it energizes you, and you really feel good when it's done. And then it gives you that challenge that you feel like you're growing in knowledge or self-satisfaction. On the opposite side of that is prolonged stress. Prolonged stress always knocks you out, like my little dude there on the side. This thing is something that causes the immune system to shut down. It does not allow for recovery, for healing. It also does not allow for your coping systems to work well and to make you get through to the other side of this without destroying you. It exhausts you completely. Now, stressors. We have a few categories. We have catastrophes, we have significant life changes, chronic daily hassles, and low social power, low social status. So remember that those stressors are any of those events that can feel overwhelming or even challenging. So let's begin with catastrophes. Now, catastrophe has positives to go along with those negatives, which is hard to believe but true. So first we need to understand what we define as a catastrophe. A catastrophe is any event that's overwhelming and harmful and that most people agree on it. So, a tornado goes through, wipes out a town, and everyone in that town goes, oh my God, what a catastrophe. They all say it. They all believe that that was a catastrophe. Therefore, it is a catastrophe. So when we look at catastrophes, it's something that everybody agrees was a catastrophe, and therefore that becomes a catastrophe. Now, short-term effects of a catastrophe. Right within the first 24 to 48 hours, we really double up, if not triple up, on heart attacks, strokes, and all sorts of other big issue problems that we have because that sympathetic nervous system really kicking into gear and overcooking it along with cortisol levels. Long-term effects, we get depression, we get anxiety, we get post-traumatic stress disorder, which brings in nightmares and flashbacks and whatnot. But what we do have with a catastrophe that we don't have with many other of our issues is the bonding that goes with it. Because the whole town was wiped out, the whole town can go to each other and cry on each other's shoulder and understand each other and their perspective. Therefore, actually giving empathy when you understand somebody else's perspective. So even those that wouldn't normally understand it now understand it because it happened to them. And because it's such a shared experience, now there's bonding over that shared experience. There's bonding over the help that goes along with it. And they will see individuals coming in to help them. The Red Cross is there. There's people from other towns and communities coming in to help. They see that, and that helps with that bonding aspect of a catastrophe. Major life changes is next. When it comes to major life changes, they can be positive and or negative. So we have to look at the fact that, yes, marriage can be a stressful thing, even though you're looking at it as a positive event. Retirement can be stressful, even though you're looking at it as a positive event. There's negative things that happen that go along with it. There's also things that are just challenges that go along with it. And when it's prolonged, it actually impacts somebody's health. It increases the negative aspects that can happen to you. Now, it can also be the negative things like death in the family, loss of a job, heart attacks, anything along those lines, pandemics. So any of those things can be a major life event or change which causes stress. Chronic daily difficulties, too many things on your plate, too much to do, don't even know where to begin. And that also goes with the ones that the text doesn't really cover well, and that's being bullied, living in poverty, or living under oppressive political conditions. When those things occur, they also are considered daily living difficulties. But typically, daily living difficulties, too many tasks, not enough time, and feel as if you have little control, you can actually control. I know we feel like we can't, but we actually can. We start saying no. We start taking time for ourselves. We change jobs if we need to. We do something to control the situation of daily difficulties, and we can correct the stressor and therefore correct the stress. The daily difficulties of being bullied, poverty, living under political oppressive conditions are all things that you yourself cannot correct. It has to be those outside of you to fix. So even though we can fix most daily difficulties, these are the ones that we can't. And we have to trust that others will help us with those situations. And if they don't, then we are forced to live in those situations. Now, our body stress response system is what plays into the way we handle these things and the way stress works. So first, that sympathetic nervous system kicks into gear. Now remember, it's fight, flight, or freeze that can happen first. Sorry. Then we have that brain that sends signals. It lets adrenaline go when we need it, but it also releases cortisol. And that cortisol can help us cope at first, but when it gets prolonged or it's released too much in a short amount of time, then what we're going to get is to the point where we've used every aspect of energy that we have, and it'll force us into complete and utter exhaustion. So let's say the death of a family member. So you get the adrenaline rush right off the bat, but what keeps you going? What gets you moving and gets you to plan for that funeral, gets you to say hi to all those people that are coming through, gets you through that whole long process that can last longer than 20 minutes. Of course, it lasts days. What we find, that's cortisol that keeps you going. That's its job, and that's what it's supposed to do. But ever notice that when you're done with all of that process, you're sheerly and utterly exhausted? That is also what cortisol does. So let's take a look at that general adaptation syndrome that cortisol does for us. So if you look at the very beginning of this, you get your stressor that happens. So let's say it is, that somebody close to you has died. Now there's a lull right there. So that's that moment that it takes that your body gets things moving. Okay, it says, all right, we need to save you. We need to go into survival mode. A lot of times people will have that slight depression that happens, but then even though they're sad, they can move and motivate. So that lull is that first understanding of that. Then that increase that you see to that line, that increases both adrenaline and cortisol coming out for survival. Now, adrenaline will stop after that phase 1, so that deepest pink portion. Adrenaline stops once it got you moving. Cortisol is what keeps you moving. Cortisol is what gets you through that whole process. But cortisol is using all reserved energy that you have. It's using up everything you got at your disposal to keep you propelled forward. And then you're going to find that you're getting exhausted to the point where there's no reserve energy and you're just done for. That's what cortisol does. Now, when we're looking at this chart, it's maybe for this one, it was the death of a family member that's putting you through it. You got that cortisol at the mid mark in between those orange or light pink area, and then something else happens. Maybe you get into a car accident, and then that shoots out some more adrenaline with some more cortisol, and then you go up. It's not like it's at the same level. You go up, it takes it up even higher, so you get like another peak going off. And then maybe something else happens. There's a fire that occurs, and you lose some stuff in your house, and so that cortisol kicks you up again. So there's different levels of hills. The more often that cortisol releases for you, the more detriment it's doing to your body. It's doing it for survival's sake, but it also causes damage while it's doing this as well. Okay. All right, we know when things are going to be a problem is when our pituitary gland gets kicked into gear. So when we look at acute stress over there on the left, that's all good stuff that happens from stress. Wonderful. When we look at path 2, though, that's when the pituitary gland gets kicked into gear. And when the pituitary gets kicked into gear, cortisol's kicked in, and that's when we've got a problem. So yes, down in the bottom box there, it says cortisol increases the release of stored energy. Yes, that's true, but I want you to write off to the side as well that not only does it increase stored energy, but it only lasts for a short amount of time. It depletes your stored energy. It uses all reserves and gets rid of everything you've got. Then it's got reduces inflammation. It does right at the very beginning, right when it's going up into the peak. But when it plateaus at the top, sort of rounded out in what was that lighter pink area, now it instead increases inflammation. It increases internal inflammation. So now your heart's inflamed, your lungs are inflamed, your stomach's inflamed, your liver's inflamed, your kidneys are inflamed. That release of cortisol inflames all of those internal organs as it's being consumed. And it also reduces your immune system response. I want you to understand, it not only reduces it, it can actually shut off your immune system. Shut it right off. So you have no immune system whatsoever. That's going to play a vital role in a lot of the diseases that we're going to discuss today. So the effects of prolonged stress are not only early aging, but early death. So know that every time you have that road rage going on, you're releasing adrenaline, you're releasing cortisol. Every time you do that, it is actually declining new neuron production. It's breaking off the ends of what we call DNA telomers, and it's shortening them, which then they can't divide where they're supposed to be, which means the cell dies, which means your tissues are made up of those cells, so they can't regenerate the way they're supposed to, and that means early aging and death. That can be easily seen for some people's skin. Have you ever seen somebody that, they looked really old and you're like, oh my goodness, look at the wrinkles on them. And then you talk to them and you find out their age is not any near what you thought their actual age was going to be. That is that prolonged stress, and it can be easily seen on the outside of their body. What can't be as easily seen are those that have the effects of prolonged stress internally with that internal inflammation. They'll eventually go to a doctor and they'll say, oh my goodness, you've got a lot of internal inflammation and this is going to kill you. So you better get that under control. Now, we also have to recognize the differences between the way males and females deal with stress and the responses of that stress. So women, remember from the sex chapter, tend and befriend. It's all about that oxytocin being released and bonding with others. So let's go back to that funeral as an example. You go to a funeral, it'll be the women that'll be asking you if you ate or if you've gotten enough sleep and caring for you about those things. That's the tend and befriend. But they tend to not do it for themselves. They tend to do it for others. The nurturance of others is what makes them get through that process better. So they show more empathy, not less, not a neutral amount. They show more empathy. On the opposite side of that, the way men tend to. Now I want you to remember, for both men and women, this is what happens to most of the population. Does every single human being react the same way? No. But a significant amount of human beings, and what we tend to say as just overall generalization of it, this is the way men compared to women react. So on men, they tend to withdraw and numb themselves, less empathy, and even can bring about alcohol and aggression. So they're looking at that funeral. They're not checking whether you've eaten, whether you've slept, or anything like that. They're maybe, how much money do I owe, and I'll just pay it. I'll wait out in the car while you and go do that. Just tell me what you want done from me and I'll do it. But you don't see a whole lot of loving, caring, hugging, that kind of stuff that goes along with it. We do tend to see men far more often numb themselves with alcohol. So at funerals, I know of many students that will discuss this regularly, that they see the men go outside and have a beer. They'll sneak some in, alcohol, so that they can get through that funeral, because that is so normalized that alcohol is the way to deal with it and to assist in numbing yourself to that situation. Now, the alcohol can increase the aggressive tendencies, but we also know that the testosterone alone will increase the aggressive tendencies. Shorter fuses, get angry easier, all of those happen when they are under stress. And again, less empathy under stress. Now, when we look at the study of stress and illness and how they correlate to each other, it's actually called psychoneuroimmunology. You will never need to spell it. When I use it, I will use it as a term that I will tell you how it's spelled right off the bat. Now, originally, when they first started to discuss this, psychologists used the term psychosomatic, but psychosomatic became known as imagined illness, not really true. Psychosomatic is the psychological aspect going with the physical aspect, but it became recognized as an imagined illness, so we could no longer use the term psychosomatic. So now what we use is psychophysiological illness. So, psychophysiological illness means that it's psychological and physical. The psychological problem can cause the physical issues that come along with it. So we can look at how that happens. Here's our psychological factors. There's the stressors is there, then your appraisal, your thoughts, and your feelings on it. All three of those things lie under psychological factors. The brain signals and the is all about the neurological aspect of it. And then we get into the hormonal and immune suppression that goes into the immunological aspect of it. So this is how they're connected and how each one of your stressors makes you react all the way till the end. When we get any kind of immune suppression or immune depletion or stoppage, then we have the risk of illness to take place, and that is actually what takes place. We can look at it as something as simple as how many colds you have. The more stress you're under, the more colds you tend to have, the more flus you have. Any of our disorders, any of our viruses that are out there, even bacterial infections, anything like that can all be things that actually are caused because you're under stress and then your immune system is shutting down or being suppressed. Now, when we look at it in a more in-depth, we can actually tell you some of the diseases that are caused by stress. One of the first ones is heart disease, and that's one of the most important ones. Originally, they came out and said, nope, it's only if you've got a genetic predisposition, then you'll have a heart attack, or high blood pressure or high cholesterol, then you'll have a heart attack. It's biological based. There's nothing else that's brought into it. Then they started to find out, well, wait a minute, there might be some behavioral things in here. Smoking, couch potatoes, high-fat diets, those can cause heart attack as well. But then our teams got together and started working on it and actually found that it's caused most often by stress. So chronic stress and the way you deal with situations actually causes those behavioral things that don't help with that immune system and biological things to come through as well with that immune system. So the psychological stressors, stress kills and causes heart disease. Part of that has to do with the type of personality you are. So when we look at personality, there's more personalities than just type A and type B, but those are the only two we're going to go over. Type A personality isn't just a go-getter that wants an A. They're the one that looks at your score and you got 1 point more than them and they're all ticked off about it. Or they look at their own score compared to the last score and they didn't do as well and they're all ticked off about it. Notice all ticked off about it keeps coming into play. Type A personalities tend to be very aggressive and angry little individuals. So remember that. They're impatient, they're aggressive, they're pushy, they're willing to harm others to get to where they want to be. The competition has gone way above and beyond. So many people will say they're type A personalities because they just want to be that person that is the motivated go-getter. But is there anger involved in it? Is there aggression involved in it? If there's not, then you might be one of the other personalities. Now at the bottom we have the type B personality. They always go with the flow. They just let it go. So let's look at an example. A type A personality going up that hill in that picture. They do going up that hill because it's there and they wouldn't stop till they got to the top no matter what, and they'd take anybody out on their way up. A type A B personality though would lean against it and relax because it's there. So another example of a type B personality, it's not just chilled out, it's to the extreme as well. A true type B personality would go in our float down here in Port Huron, fall out of their tube and be drowning, and they'll be like, oh, it's just too much work to swim to the side or try to get out of this. I've had a good life. I'll just chill out and let it go. There's your type B personality. So are either one of them actually any good? And the answer is no. What you want is somewhere in between there. There's C, D, there's other personalities out there. And you want somewhere in between the type A and type B personality where it's not causing you harm. So remember to stop and smell the flowers. That's the big saying that's out there. Try and bring down that type A personality so that you do chill out just a bit. Another thing that we know about heart disease as well as all of our other diseases we're going into is the way you look at things, pessimistic, optimistic, or somewhere in between, which we tend to call realistic. So the pessimistic people are negative Nellies. Everything is just a downer. Nothing's ever going to get any better. They just whine and complain, and life just sucks for them. Our optimistic, on the other side, are perky, peppy people all the time. Everything's going to turn out wonderful. Now, again, there's a bit of non-realistic thought processes in here, and nothing will go wrong. Then we have the realistic in between. They've got some pessimism, they've got some optimism, they put them both together, and they're more in the center of it, the more realistic aspect. And again, that's what we look for. Now, between men and women, men tend to be more pessimistic. Women have a longer range or a wider range of emotions, so they could go deeper in depression, but they know what joy and euphoria is, where men have a shorter range that they have, and so they tend to sometimes stick in that negative, nilly, pessimistic thing, where they don't trust anybody, it's never going to work out kind of thing. And what we find is because they tend to be more negative, men tend to have more heart disease, and they tend to have a shorter life by approximately 10 years the more pessimistic they are. So even between men that are optimistic compared to men that are pessimistic, the men that are pessimistic have 10 years shorter lifespan. So try to get out of that negative, nilly thought process and start to think more optimistically, more realistically, more positive. Okay. So when we look at depression, for many years they said depression had nothing to do with heart disease, and we knew it did. Psychologists knew it did. We just weren't finding the connection for the longest time. Now, if you're watching commercials, which more than likely are every now and again, there's medications out there, there's discussions out there that are talking about depression and heart disease. So here's how it's linked. You have your chronic stressors. They cause that cortisol to be released, which causes that excessive inflammation. Now, if you're depressed, depression itself causes cortisol release, which causes the inflammation. And then that inflammation causes cardiac disease or heart disease. Now, the problem with it is, if you have cardiac disease or heart disease, it also increases its own inflammation. So inflammation causes it, yet it causes inflammation both ways. So the more it increases inflammation, inflammation includes inside that brain, that inflammation causes depression. So you'll notice the arrows go both ways, from depression to inflammation, from inflammation to cardiac disease. And although depression and cardiac disease do not have an arrow crossing between them, they are connected by where their arrows are going, and that's that excessive inflammation. Excessive inflammation causes both of them. So if one of those things happens, such as depression, it causes increased inflammation, which therefore will cause cardiac disease. When we look at the health consequences, this is where that immune system is going to come into play, and that repeated use of cortisol and the release of it over and over again. So we have persistent stressors that are happening, negative emotions that are happening. Now, they tend to cause unhealthy behaviors. That's smoking or drinking, not sleeping well, eating fat food, whatever. But I want you to look at those unhealthy behaviors and look to see where the arrow is coming out from them. Notice there is no arrow coming out from them. That's the point. They're not causing this. Not causing this. Okay? But the stressor causes the release of those stress hormones, including that cortisol. That cortisol kicks in your autonomic nervous system, which makes inflammation, high blood pressure, all sorts of those things happening, which shuts down your immune system. That doesn't shut down your immune system. The release of the cortisol shuts down the immune system, and the release of the cortisol starts that inflammation for heart disease. The problem with it is this: if your immune system is shut down, you have higher issues with your heart disease or any other disorder or disease that we're going to talk about, because the immune system is not there to protect you from whatever else is coming in. So, you can look back at those unhealthy behaviors. Now your immune system is shut off. Your immune system is shut off because of the release of the cortisol from those stressors. Now you do your unhealthy behaviors. And although your unhealthy behaviors don't cause heart disease, your unhealthy behaviors with stress work through your immune system to make things worse to cause heart disease. So you're a smoker. As long as you're not under stress and you're a smoker, your immune system should kick out that the ramifications of smoking and causing heart disease. But if you're under stress, you're smoking, you don't have your immune system, then you don't have the protection. What stands in between bad behaviors and your diseases and disorders is your immune system. If your immune system is compromised, if your immune system is shut down, if your immune system is even working at subpar levels, then those unhealthy behaviors can come into play because the immune system isn't able to kick them out. Now, we found that out significantly when it came to runners. We had generations of people that became marathon runners, became vegan eaters, ate everything perfectly, never smoked, never had high-fat diets, did everything exactly the way they were supposed to do. Yet they were dying of heart attacks way more than the couch potato that drank a gallon of wine a day, that had 25 hamburgers a day or more, and never moved, never did anything that they were supposed to do. The couch potato was far more healthy than the marathon runner was. And they couldn't understand why they were more healthy when it came to heart disease. And what it came down to was that type A personality, was the immune system, how much stress were they under, and that stressor was shutting down the immune system so that smaller things you can normally fight off were causing larger issues. Now we can go into the health and happiness aspect. For health and happiness, we're going to look at how to make these more positive and where our positivity comes from, how to get there. So promoting health, we're going to look at these different things, addressing the stressors, soothing them, optimism versus pessimism, that kind of thing. Aerobic exercise, relaxation and meditation, alternative medicines, and communities of faith, not religion, faith. All of those things and how they can promote health throughout the rest of the chapter. Coping with stress. You can either be problem-focused or emotion-focused. Problem-focused means you work on tackling that event, that difficulty, and fixing the problem. Emotion-focused tends to be the ones that state that the problem can't be fixed, so now you have to fix the way you deal with that problem. So let's say at work, you have a problem at work, you have a boss that's giving you all the junky jobs, and you were hired at the same time as somebody else, and they get all the cream jobs, you get all the junk jobs. How do you fix that? Many times we as humans go, well, I have nothing I can do about it, but you can. You need to confront the problem. Not confront it negatively, confront it in a positive, appropriate manner. So you confront that boss and say, you know, we were hired at the same time, and I'm sure this is just me, but you seem to be giving all the good jobs to them and all the junk jobs to me, and I'd like to even that out a little bit. What can I do to fix this? What can I do to work with you to correct this issue? Now, if they look at you and say, no, I hate your guts, first of all, you have a go above their head. You have a way to sue them now. There's all sorts of stuff that could come into play there. That's really not going to say what they're going to say. They're going to say, oh, no, that's not what I meant. I just trusted you more. I think that you could do those jobs better than the other person. They'll come up with some kind of crud that says as to why they did it. And you discuss with them how they can trust the other person more and give them some more of those other jobs. And you need to do a little bit of both together, and let's work on it together and develop a plan kind of stuff. Okay? Now, if that doesn't work, then we can go into emotion-focused. Emotion-focused means, all right, you know that boss doesn't like you, even though they won't admit it. You know that this is not going to get any better. So either resign yourself to, not sadly, but saying, all right, I'm getting paid such and such an hour for this. I'll just take my paycheck and do it. I'm not going to worry about it anymore. But you really have to do that, not worry about it anymore, in order for it to be emotion-focused. Okay? Or you could say, all right, I'll be problem-focused. I'm going to look for another job because this isn't working out. You're not going to quit yet. You're going to keep that income going until you find the other job, and then you can move on. That's both problem-focusing it and emotion-focusing it, looking for people that would work better with your emotional comfort level. So one, the other, if not both of them, are ways you need to deal with stress. Now, who is the real Superman? I have Kirk Allen, George Reeves, Christopher Reeve, or Adam West. So I'll give you a second to pick out which one I think is the real Superman. All right, Adam West was Batman. He was the one that was on that cartoonish one where it put in a big cartoon. Ow, wow, bam, that kind of thing. Don't know how old you are. You might not remember it, but that's what Adam West was. All three of the others played Superman in a movie. And the person that I think is the real Superman is, of course, number 3, Christopher Reeve. Here's why. He got knocked off of a horse in a riding accident, became paralyzed from the shoulders down. He was told he was never going to walk again. He was never going to be able to hold his children again. He was never going to, and there was a long list of never going to do, because they had no research on spinal cord injuries, and they did not know what to do or how to even approach it. And he was amazed because throughout the military, we've got spinal cord injuries throughout history, yet no one's done any study on it. No one's done anything to try and correct that issue. So what he did was be both emotion focused and problem focused. He looked at the problem and said, well, wait a minute. If there is no study on it, let's get study on it. And he created the Christopher Reeve Paralysis Foundation. Now, of course, he's got money to be able to do that, but he also found other people to bring in the money, and he started massive research on spinal cord injuries and how to correct those. On the other portion of it, he became emotion focused. Emotion focused meaning doctors told him that he wasn't going to be able to do it, and he went, oh no, yes I will, just watch me. It's sort of like somebody telling you, oh, you'll never get that job because you're just no good at it, and you go and do it just for the sake of ticking them off or making them wrong. That's what he did. I will prove you wrong, and I will change this. And he did. He did hug his children. He did walk, talk, that kind of thing. Now, the walking, of course, wasn't maybe what we would count as long-term walking or anything, but he was able to do everything that he was told he wouldn't be able to do. All right. Now, if you were to give up instead of taking that solving approach or emotion solving approach, what will happen is what's called learned helplessness. You will have the belief that you are not able to change anything or do anything about your situation. Now, of course, a guy named Seligman did lots of studies on learned helplessness. He found it fascinating. He didn't understand why it took place. So, of course, each one of our theorists had to torture some kind of thing, and he used dogs. So what he did with dogs was he repeatedly electrocuted them, and they really had no way to get out of this room. And he found that eventually the dogs would just lay down and take the electrical zaps because they had given up. They had given up because they were turned around at every door. They had given up. That's what happens with humans as well. When they're trying to get out of poverty, let's say, and one door after another is shut down for them, learned helplessness takes place because they're getting electrocuted over and over and over again, just like the dogs, and then they eventually just lay down and take it. That is learned helplessness. What happens with learned helplessness? They then feel that they have lost complete personal control. They feel that they have lost complete and utter all hope, and humans need hope in order to continue on through life. And so then they decline to not only help themselves, but help others as well. We need to give people personal control in order for people to thrive. First thing in that is the internal compared to external locus of control. An internal locus of control makes you feel as if you are completely in charge at all times. But we have to be careful with that. We can't have too much internal locus of control because then that causes depression as well. We will have this illusion that everything is caused by us. It's our fault. Well, if I'd just done that, if I could have done that better. Any of those things, too much internal locus of control. Then we have external locus of control, and that is the belief that outside forces control us, ourselves, and our fate in the end. Too much external locus of control means that you lose your willpower, you have that learned helplessness. You want to be somewhere in between the total external locus of control and the total internal locus of control. Some things you can allow other people to control. Some things you can't control. Now you have to work with that understanding somewhere in between there. Now, when we look at that self-control, we have to understand willpower. Many people believe that willpower is infinite, which means it goes on forever. That is untrue. Willpower is a finite source, which means that it does end. You can practice it just like studying. You can practice it and get it to improve, but it is not infinite and never will be. So again, we bring up this, we've studied it with children, that marshmallow study. How long can they wait before they'll eat that marshmallow? Can they wait until, 10, 15 minutes down the road when you come back to give them more? Or when we look at adults, we could see adults as well. Put chocolate in front of me, and I don't know how long I can hold on and wait for that. So what is it that you have a lack of willpower on? Every diet ends. Diets end because it's a diet, and it's a finite resource to do that diet. Next thing is we also have to understand the way we look at situations. There are many things that we view pessimistically without even understanding that we're viewing it pessimistically. So if we understand those things and we try to alter that, then we can change that pessimistic versus optimistic outlook. Now there's several different portions to optimism compared to pessimism. We tend to look at it as the half full or half empty glass. And I've heard that many times, and I'm sure that you have too. Half empty or half full. Do you look at the glass as half empty or half full? Half empty being pessimistic, half full being positive or optimistic. But there's other portions to pessimism and optimism. The next one is your prediction abilities. Do you always expect the worst? Oh yeah, I'll apply for the job, but I probably won't get it. Oh yeah, I'll talk to them about that problem, but nothing will probably change. Anytime you think probably it won't work out, you're looking at a prediction value that is pessimistic compared to optimistic. If you always look at it like everything's going to work out, of course I'm going to get that job, nobody else is going to get it. All of that optimism, again, it's your prediction value. What we want is somewhere in between there. Attribution of intent is next one, and that mainly has to do with people. Do you generally look at people and assume that they mean to hurt you with the things that they say, the things that they do, even if they're loved ones and whatnot? Or do you automatically look at their intent as, oh, they must be having a bad day today? Then we have valuation. Do you value yourself? Do you deem yourself as lovable and valuable, or do you deem yourself more useless? It's the way we value ourselves, is the way we deem other people value us. Then we have the potential for change. Do you have hope? Do you believe things can change for the future? Or do you not and give up? That potential for change is also important in this optimism versus pessimism thought process. So we're going to do a little quiz with you on your optimism versus pessimism and see where you stand on it. So I have a few questions. I think there's 7 of them. But we're going to start with this first one. You forgot your partner's birthday. Now, what I want for partner is the most important person in your life. I want you to think of the most important person in your life. I don't care if it's mom, a significant other, child. It don't matter. But you forgot your partner's birthday. Okay? Now, is the reason you forgot your partner's birthday A, I'm not good at remembering birthdays, or is it B, I was preoccupied by other things? I want you to think of the last time you forgot that most important person's birthday. If you've always remembered, then think of another most important person of which you have forgotten their birthday. And what was the reason? Is it I'm not good at remembering birthdays, or is it I was preoccupied by other things? All right, the pessimistic view is A. I'm not good at remembering birthdays. What you're actually stating is twofold. One, I'm giving up on the fact that I'm never going to be able to remember a birthday. And what cracks me up on this is that sometimes they can remember, drive by a car and they can tell you what year it is, what make it is, what model, what type of engine is in it, all sorts of crap about all of those things, but can't remember a birthday that happens every year on the exact same date. That's a priority situation. That, there's an issue there. Or they can remember every baseball stat there is, but not remember your birthday. The other aspect to it is I'm not good at remembering birthdays is not only you giving up, it's that you're saying that the priority of the person's birthday that you should be remembering, they are not important enough to remember. Okay? Now there's things that you can do. That you can put it, there's this thing they made a long time ago, it's called a calendar. You can write that stuff down. Now, with these smartphones, you can put it in your phone and it will remind you every year. It's amazing. Like mine reminds me a week beforehand and tells me that the birthday is coming up. If you're on Facebook or anything like that, other people's birthdays are in there. They ask me if I want to buy them a Target gift card, for goodness sake, because their birthday is coming up. There are ways to get that birthday remembered, and by using those ways, you will remember more on your own. Next question we have, you lose your temper with a friend, not family, so you must exclude family on this. I want you to think of the last time you lost your temper with a friend. Think back. Now, is it A, she or he, we're not going to be biased here, she or he is always nagging you? Or is it she or he was in a hostile mood? So what was the reason? And I want you to really think back to the last time you lost your temper with a friend and really look at that situation. Was that situation that that person's always nagging you, or was that situation that that person was in a hostile mood that made you lose your temper? All right, if you chose A, that person's always nagging you, that's the pessimistic outlook. You need to change that pessimism, which means you need to get rid of that friend. Now, if it's family members that do it, there's not a whole lot. Yeah, you can lose family members too, but it's easier to just lose the friends that aren't really friends. If they're always nagging you, the whole reason that people nag you is to make you feel as bad as them. It makes people feel better. So they will nag you constantly to make you feel as bad as them. And once they've achieved that, then they feel better. You do not need friends that make you feel bad just because they feel bad. You have family for that. We all have family for that. So get rid of the friend, and you know how to do it. Next time you see them and you see them walking and they haven't seen you yet, duck into the john, hide from them. Every time they call, pretend you're going through a tunnel like you do with telemarketers. I can't hear you. The less time you spend with them, the less they will actually seek you out. That's the way to lose friends. And get rid of that one. How about this? You've been feeling run down lately. Is it I never get a chance to relax, or I was exceptionally busy this week? Which one do you choose? Pessimistic views, A, I never get a chance to relax. That's your choice. You have to start telling people no. You have to start letting things go. You have to start saying, I'm taking time for me. And you have to do that in order to not feel run down. So you have to come up with a plan. You have to come up with other people to help you. You have to start handing off jobs to others. This is a choice for you. And if you always say, I never get a chance to relax, then that's just automatically the loss of hope, the pessimistic aspect of it, and it automatically pushes you away from feeling more positive. A friend says something that hurts your feelings. Is it because she or he always blurts things out without thinking of others, or she or he was in a bad mood and took it out on you? Now, hopefully you've been catching a pattern to this as we've been going through here. The pessimistic answer is, of course, A. If you have a friend that's always blurting things out without thinking of other people's feelings, get rid of them. You've got family for that. So get rid of the friends that try to bring you down and try to make things pessimistic for you. So overall, I love Calvin and Hobbes, and I have a million things that bug me. And he writes, dried out ketchup on the bottom rim, toast crumbs in the butter, mushy bananas, worms on sidewalk, skin on pudding. I have students who don't know what skin on pudding is. That's when you make your pudding and you put it in the refrigerator without putting a sealable top on it. When you go to pull it back out, there will be this film of pudding on the top that you can actually lift right up and throw away. Ew, it gives me the total heebie-jeebies. But yeah, skin on pudding. Making hand gestures for quotation marks and raisins. And the other one comes in and says, well, what about excessively negative people? He goes, yeah, that's a good one. Until he figures out that he means him. Now here's the problem with this cartoon. When you go to excessively negative people and you tell them that they are excessively negative and need to work on it, will they believe you or understand that or take your advice? No, they will not. And in fact, you will become part of the negative Nilly aspect. Now you're just a bad person. Now you're picking on them. Now you're a reason for them to be sad, upset, whatever. So many negative people, telling them that they're negative all the time doesn't help unless they get some professional help to try and counteract it. Now we have a chart between excessive pessimism, excessive optimism, and the realistic aspect in between. You can read that on your own. I don't have to read it for you, but there's things on both sides of the spectrum. We're hoping for you to get somewhere in between in that realistic aspect. Now, when we're promoting health, what is it that promotes health? Number one, close relationships. You need a close relationship. Now, it used to be how many friends you had when you're growing up. It's not how many friends. It's that level of friendship that you have with the close friends. So I always call them a shovel buddy. A shovel buddy. Yep, shovel buddy. Now, what is a close relationship? Let's say you accidentally, on purpose, it doesn't matter, kill somebody. Who is it that you call right off the bat that says, I got the shovel? That's your close relationship. Close relationships are important. You can have close relationships outside of work, outside of school, in work. There's all different type of relationships that happen, but you really need that one shovel buddy that's always there. Okay? Then we have social support. That's everything outside of that. That's your community, your faith. That is on an outer level of those close relationships, and they all help as well. And the number one things that we really know help are, of course, pets. Dogs, we have found through research, are number one, but any pets will work. You petting them and taking care of them causes releases of endorphins and makes you feel better and reduces stress levels. Laughter is the other thing. The more you laugh, the more you feel better because it releases endorphins, reduces that stress level. Of course, aerobic exercise or any kind of exercise helps a great deal. And of course, we have this on the chart you can see on the right. Anytime you get your body moving, it actually releases endorphins, reduces that stress level. Now, they did studies with, it says no treatment group. That means they didn't do anything with them. Then they had the group that did relaxation training or relaxation treatments, and they taught them how to relax. And you could see that they did much better. And then we had the aerobic exercise people, and they, of course, when they worked with depression, it reduced depression a great deal more. The problem with it is the more depressed you are, the less you feel like exercising, but the more you actually need to exercise. So get that aerobic exercise going. And then, of course, relaxation works as well. And so we're going to have some relaxation things that you can do. Excuse me. Now we have lifestyle modification. I pushed the button too quickly on lifestyle modification, so I'll just tell you about it. Lifestyle modification is actually reducing the stressors in your life. Now, there are those people, they worked with heart attack people, and they looked at how many more heart attacks they had after that first one. And the first group, or the study group that they did, was a group that got all the right medications. They made sure they took them every day. They made sure they did took all their medications, took all everything that they were supposed to do that you're assigned after a heart attack, they did, and they followed them and saw how many more heart attacks they had afterwards. Now, the other group was a group of people that had heart attacks, and instead of worrying about medications, instead of worrying about anything along those lines, they taught them how to relax. They taught them how to not be task overloaded, to look at things and problem solve and emotion solve them, to not have road rage, to not have any of those higher level stress reactions. And when they taught them how to not have them, the people that had a heart attack taught how to relax and not just changed their life about this stress and the way they deal with stress, they didn't have any more heart attacks. They had very few heart attacks. The rates were, a great, outstanding change in heart attacks. Those that took the medications did everything the doctors told them to do, but did not change the way they dealt with stress, not only had another heart attack, it increased as far as heart attacks. Then we can go to this relaxation and meditation. Any kind of relaxation techniques. Now, people will tell you count to 10. It's more than 10. And there's whole methodology that goes with it. It's not only just counting to 10, it's the way you're breathing, it's where you're putting your mind, that kind of thing. Relaxation techniques help with headaches, high blood pressure, anxiety, insomnia. It helps all sorts of things, and mainly it helps that immune functioning to get it going and it working. And of all the things that we've discussed in this chapter, you know that you need to keep that immune system working in order for you to not get sick. You need a more positive outlook. Meditation, relaxation helps you to get that more positive outlook. So if you don't know how to meditate, here's how to meditate. Many people have asked me on how to do it, so I made sure I put it here so that you knew how to do it and could read through it and keep this for yourself. Hostility and mortality are highly linked as well. People that do not have hostility or keep their level of hostility low tend to not have problems with dying or dying earlier than normal. Those that are highly hostile are the ones that die early. That anger level, that hostility level causes you to die early. So you really need to look at your anger level and bringing it down and starting to not care about some of these situations that you're in or the level of hostility that goes with them. People that are highly hostile have a 7 times more likely to die by the age of 50. Now, when we look at happiness, that guy that did the study with electrocuting dogs, his name was Seligman, he did the studies on happiness as well. And so with his studies on happiness, he found that happiness was more than just a term. It was a mood, a phenomenon. There's all sorts of aspects inherent in the term happiness. And he said what brought about happiness the most was something called the feel-good, do-good phenomenon. There's 2 portions to that. Feel good, do good. The more you are happy, the more you help others. Okay, and you just do it naturally. But the other thing that he found out is the more you do things for others, the more happy we tend to feel ourselves. So it really started what was called the Pay It Forward program. You remember that Pay It Forward? You do something for somebody else and it'll make you feel good. Well, unfortunately, that narcissistic social media got involved and really ruined it and ruined every aspect of it because people started to look for reaction. Now, when you react to somebody doing something negative, that's the way we as humans tend to think others will react to us. So you're in the grocery line and you can't pay for everything you have there. The person behind you, are going to sigh. They're going to put their hand on their hip. They're going to cock their head to the side. They're going to be like, God, you can't add. There'll be a negative aspect to it. People are ready for that. People are understanding of that, prepared for that. What they aren't prepared for is when you don't have enough money at that grocery line and somebody says, don't worry, I got the rest of it, and just hands over the money and then walks away. That person that is standing there in the grocery line was ready for negative, ready for a retort. And when you catch them off guard and do something nice, they don't know what to do. Now, they can have an automatic response that includes that thank you, but not always. And the reason they don't is because it doesn't even come to mind until well after you should have walked away. And it just doesn't sink in. My God, somebody's doing something nice for me instead of treating me like crap. So you have to understand that the response time for a positive reaction is up to 7 minutes. So response time is 7 minutes. It's instantaneous for negative. Response time for a positive can be up to 7 minutes. You have to know and understand that to do the Pay Forward program. So what social media did was these individuals were saying, well, I paid for the rest of their groceries. And they didn't even say thank you. They didn't even look at me. Well, sometimes when people are poor and don't have enough money and things are going wrong for them and somebody does something nice, they automatically start to cry or get teary-eyed. And how many of you like to look right at people and talk to them when you're teary-eyed or when you're crying? And so they may not even look at you because they don't know how to react. The reaction that they're having is embarrassing for them. There's lots of reasons why. And here's the most important reason why. Well, why does it matter how they react? Isn't this about you? That's what the Pay It Forward is about, not about somebody else. It's about you. So you pay it forward, you've just done something nice, you walk away and just feel good about the fact that you've done something nice. Knowing that the whole pay it forward thought process is that person, when they're capable of understanding and dealing with the fact that somebody has done something nice, and when they're capable, they will do something nice for somebody else. It's pay it forward, not pay it back to me. Not I want a reaction out of you. That's narcissism. When anybody does something to get a reaction from somebody else, then they are doing it for their own reasons, not for the pay it forward reasons. And that's a whole different aspect. Okay. Now here's our Seligman guy. He did that study on learned helplessness and then did studies on happiness and then looked at positive psychology. He said that there were 3 pillars of what we deem as positive psychology: emotions, character, and your group, your culture around you, the institutions you're involved in. Those 3 pillars of positive psychology will decide your happiness level and your positivity out in the community. And so, of course, there was theories and theorists and the whole subsection of psychology that was created around this positive psychology. Now, happiness and the way it happens with humans, it goes up and down, up and down. So I want you to look at the top picture over the course of a week. You could see that Mondays get the bad rap and say that that's the worst day, but it's not actually. Tuesdays are worse than Mondays, and Wednesdays are the worst. Wednesdays was completely negative. Okay, then Thursdays, they're not quite happy. They're not on the positive side yet, but not as bad as that negative red, yucky Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Then Friday's the best day of the week for the happiness level, then Saturday, then Sunday. Now, why is Friday the happiest compared to Saturday and Sunday? Because many of you are still in school, many of you are still at work, that kind of thing. It actually has to do with hope. It's hope for the weekend. It is, I plan on doing this, this, and this, and that. And then Saturday happens and you didn't do this, 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 and that. You didn't do much of anything. And then Sunday happens and you really realize you didn't do this, 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 and that. And you got to go back to work on Mondays. But it's still Sunday. Okay? So that's the reason of the happiness level. It has to do with hope and that human nature of hope. Now, something happened many years ago that actually changed this scale. And it changed this scale, and in particular, it changed Wednesday. All the rest of them remained exactly the same, but Wednesday's negative actually went up into the green side, the positive side. Now, what was it that happened that made that occur? It was actually a commercial. The commercial had to do with Hump Day. So it was a camel that wandered around and said, "Hey, Mike, what day is it?" And they had to say that it was Hump Day to this camel. I don't even remember what that commercial sold. Somehow I think it was insurance, but I'm not sure. And because of that, there were memes about Hump Day. There were, little videos about Hump Day. There was all sorts of stuff that came out from that commercial. And people were all excited so that on Wednesdays, they'd be up at 12:01 to put the first Facebook meme about Wednesday being Hump Day. And it made everyone so happy and so enjoyable about that Wednesday that it actually changed the chart. Now, of course, the commercial went away, it didn't run, and then we went right back to where we were. So that happened. And then we're going to look at the over the course of the day. So you have 2 moods that run at the same time all the time. You have a positive emotion, you have a negative emotion. It's just who's in charge at the moment. We tend to see for most people that right off the bat in the very morning when they first wake up, there's negative. Now, I fall right into this most popular group. When I wake up, I can't stand to talk to you. I don't want to jump for joy around anywhere. I'm not even looking in the mirror because I don't like her. You know, it's negative until I have my coffee, till I start getting moving, till I pet my dog a few times. There's a few things that come into play, and then that positive emotion, that peppiness starts coming out, and then I can start being my peppy self throughout the day. Now, there tends to be a little lull around lunchtime for positive, and then I want you to look over where where the negative takes over later in the day. It goes with hangry, hungry and angry at the same time, usually around dinner time to after dinner time. And even though you satisfy yourself with eating, you still remain negative. Now, that doesn't mean you're in a bad mood. It's negative emotion, not bad mood. So that negative emotion, like in the mornings, you'll say, "Hey, let's go out. We'll do lunch. Let's go have a beverage." And in the evening, if someone were to stop by and ask if you wanted to go out for uh, um, a beverage in the evening or anything like that, you'll be like, "Why didn't you call before you stopped by?" "No, I don't feel like it. I just want to sit on the couch and do nothing, watch television." That's why a lot of times too, you'll make plans for the evening and all of a sudden that evening you're like, "Yeah, I just don't feel like it." That's that a negative emotion taking over. Wealth and well-being is the next one. People went to college for being well off financially now. That is never the reason in history as to why people went to college. They did it to develop a meaningful life philosophy. There's a whole different context. Now, what if I said that as you're going to school right now, we'll give you develop for you a meaningful life philosophy, but you're not going to make money, you're not going to be well off financially. That's of no concern. Of course, that would not bring you back to school some more. It's all about finances now. So, how could it be that in the past it used to be about developing a meaningful philosophy of life instead of about being well off financially? And that's because of the loss of the middle class. Now, many people will say that there is no loss of middle class, and that's quite simply because they don't know what the middle class was. So let me describe to you what the middle class was. And this was the norm of society. Middle class typically had both parents in the home and typically had about 2.5 children. Now, with that middle class people, they owned their own home. They had two vehicles. One was always within 3 years old, and the other one was within 10 to 12 years old, and no more than that. And they always switched them over. But they both could buy two vehicles that were running well and kept up mechanically as well. Now, for those children, not only did they have health care, complete health care for everybody, dental, vision, and every other version of health care. That was a part of it. They made an income well enough that they could take 2 vacations a year, with one of those vacations being out of country if they so choose. And that's for all 4 of them to go. They also had enough money to have money put away for college so that a bachelor's degree was paid for both children by the parents on their middle income. Now, we tend to look at that now as higher income. That used to be the middle class. That used to be the middle of everything until things got so skewed. Then we actually voted for individuals that changed that and said that the trickle-down theory would work, that it'll come down to you. So yes, at that time, companies were regulated to give insurance to their personnel. They were regulated to give a certain amount of income to their people. And then we allowed them to trick us and say, "Well, no, if you give us, the rich, more money, we'll give it back to you, more money," instead of regulating us. And we fell for it. And when we fell for it, the middle class actually just sort of left. And now what we deem as middle class, I know I couldn't put both my kids through college. I know I couldn't afford 2 vehicles with 3 years old. And I'm supposed to be middle to higher end middle. It's all a bunch of pucky. I came from when real middle class was. I was a child during that time period. I know exactly what it is. And I know we have completely lost it because trickle down doesn't work. Why doesn't trickle down work? Greed. Greed is a psychological issue. When you get some, you need more. Have you ever noticed when you get a job and you finally get the things that you wanted to get, that you want a better job to get more things, to get more money? Now, you think all of a sudden that the people at the top end of the scale don't want more money? That's just naive. Of course they do. That's why we have, oh, who is it that's a trillionaire. We've never had a trillionaire before. Could never spend the money in his lifetime at all, but he needs it. Why? Greed. Greed means I want more, I'll give you less in order for me to get more. And the best way to do it is to trickle down. Make people believe that they have to fight for the income from each other instead of fight for the income from those people that have all the money that you worked so hard for. So now we're just looking at trying to do well financially so we're not dirt poor. Now, questions come up about can money bring happiness? I'd always like to check it out myself, so I do play the lotto every once in a while, just hoping that, I want to do the research on this. That's the whole reason. But personal income, the higher the personal income happens, it does not increase your happiness level. Notice the happiness level happens right at the very beginning there. So there is a jump when you first get it. You buy that boat and the snowmobiles and the ATVs and the bigger house on the lake and whatever else. But then it starts to decrease and pretty much stays exactly the same as it was. But you become more humps and lulls. Over time, the more money you're making. Money doesn't produce happiness. Now, it produces happiness in getting the things that you need. But once you get wants, here's where greed falls into play. The greed says the more you get, the more you need, because now you're looking at others and you're competing with them. And we all like to say that we don't. But by God, when I look at so-and-so and they've got a boat and I love the lake and I don't got a boat, so I need to make more money to get a boat. And then when I get my boat, I park it next to a person who's got a better boat. So then I need to improve my boat and get a better boat. It's the same thing. It happens with yachts as well. It happens with owning their own islands. All of those things, they need more. Always somebody will have something more or something different and they'll need it. Because of greed, it doesn't increase your happiness level when you're rich, supposedly. Again, I'd like to do my own personal research on that. So let's take a look at a couple of things. First is the adaptation level phenomenon. The adaptation level phenomenon means you adapt to your new income level. So once you adapt, you go back to the same base emotions that you've had before. So no matter what it is now adapted to, and it is your new normal. So when you look at things, you're basing it off new normal, not based off of the way it used to be. So it's called the adaptation level phenomenon. Next thing is that greed aspect, and it's called relative deprivation. Feeling worse off by comparing yourself to people who are doing better. Or doing, for the richest of the rich, it could be doing less than you, but they have something different than you. So you need more so that you have everything that everybody else has in the world. So there's no end to this. Relative deprivation doesn't have an end. And once you start feeding that beast has a real hard time and it's an addiction. Greed is an addiction. You cannot undo it that easily. And many people don't want to do it because we don't look at money as something that is an addictive problem. Now, correlations of happiness, they say that happy people tend to have higher self-esteem, are more optimistic, have close relationships, all those things that I really just discussed with you, that they have those things, so they tend to be happier. The things that they looked at and said doesn't have anything to do with your happiness level, your gender, even though there's a wider range on happiness levels between the genders, that they overall, because they can feel just as depressed, even more depressed than men do, the overall is an equivalent. Age doesn't, parenthood doesn't, physical attractiveness doesn't, because there's a set point. And that set point means there's a level of happiness that we tend to keep returning to, just like you do your weight. Now, here's ways that you can increase your happiness. Ways you can increase your happiness have to do with everything on the sheet, things that we've talked about. And again, that big one is the feel good, and do good to feel good phenomenon. So don't forget that aspect.